Okay, welcome back to my channel, Made Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we're going to be doing my December wrap-up. For the month of December, I did not do a TBR, and that was the first time on my channel that I forewent that kind of quintessential video, and I wanted to just let myself do more mood reading and see kind of what I was in the mood for. And I actually ended up reading quite a bit in December. I ended up reading 16 books, though some of the books on this list are art collections of an author that I've grown to love, and a couple of these are also kids' picture books. Starting with the first one I read in December, that was Rage by Bob Woodward. Now, this book is a follow-up to the first book that Bob Woodward wrote about Trump, which was Fear. And the Fear kind of talks about his rise, his political rise, and Rage talks about his reign, his time in office. And let me just tell you that the only reason I could get through this book was by knowing that this man will no longer be in office. So if you were kind of concerned about reading a book that might be triggering to you in that regard, I do think that knowing that he's on his way out is helpful when you're reading this book. I read Fear years ago when it first came out, and I really liked the way that Bob Woodward just kind of laid facts in front of you and didn't really give his own opinion on pretty much anything. And he did the same style for Rage. So he doesn't really tell you how he feels about things, except at the very end, which according to people who wrote reviews is a big deviance for him. But during the entire book, he just states the madness, the craziness that has been going on behind the scenes, some things that we've seen, some things we haven't, during the Trump presidency. And it's just mind-blowingly awful. Like, I'm not gonna lie. But I do think that it's good to be informed, and I don't regret having read the book. I'm glad that I now have this information. I also found through kind of researching this book that Bob Woodward has written books about pretty much every president in his lifetime or since he's become an author. And I'm now interested in reading the books that he's written about other presidents because, like I said, even though his style might seem dry, when I take them in via audiobook, they just kind of go really smoothly for me for some reason. And I'm really interested to see some things that happened, you know, when I was probably too young to even care about them with, you know, Bill Clinton and other presidents. So yeah, I think I'll be picking up some of his other work in the future. I gave Rage 5 stars, not because the writing was anything special, because as I said, it's pretty cut and dry, but because I think that everything was laid out in a very logical and easy to understand timeline, even though things can get convoluted. I think he did a really good job of making sure that didn't happen, and like I said, it provided much needed truths. The second book that I read is Giovannis Room by James Baldwin. I hadn't read anything from James Baldwin before, but I was really excited to finally pick up a work from this highly influential and clearly very loved author. However, this book was just not it for me. In this book, we're following an American man who lives in Paris in the 1950s. This man is gay. In America in the 1950s, being gay was not something that was okay. You were never supposed to show it, you were never supposed to accept it, and I'm sure that this led to a lot of internalized homophobia. James Baldwin has this main character really personify this aspect of a gay man's identity. The problem is this aspect colors the entire book. You can't go like 5 pages in this book without some internalized homophobia being projected onto someone else, or misogyny, rampant misogyny throughout this book. Now I know, again, the 1950s misogyny was a thing, but I really did not enjoy reading how that was brushed off so easily on the pages of this book, both the internalized homophobia and the misogyny. It was just painful to read at times. Like, to the point where one of the gay characters in the book says that women really need a good beating to show them what their real place is in life. And no other character challenges this statement. It's just put out there and everyone's like, yeah, man, yeah, I feel that. And it was just not enjoyable. Even if I contextualize it to the 1950s, it doesn't mean that I have to enjoy reading those words go unchallenged. So it was just the hatred, the self-hatred that the main character had, and then the prejudices of the time colored the book so much that almost all of the beauty was lost for me. I went into this book pretty blind, so I didn't quite know what to expect, but I certainly wasn't expecting a book this depressing. So just be aware if you're going to pick this book up, it's not a happy book. So if you go in with that expectation, I think it might not color your experience as much as it did mine. Another thing that kind of drove me up the wall was the way that the characters would read into each other just from one look. Now, I am a character-based reader, and this is essentially a character study, so I don't mind having a lot of attention be put on interrelations between the characters. However, two characters would like meet eyes, and then there would be 2 pages of how the main character could tell how they were feeling hatred and joy and sadness all in one, and how the chasm of their life was going to swallow them whole from one glance. And for me, that type of writing just doesn't work. I've read other classics that have that type of writing, and that also doesn't work for me. I can understand getting a couple emotions or impressions from meeting someone's eyes, but it's kind of the same thing as in some YA novels where 2 characters will meet each other and look into each other's eyes and just know they're destined for each other, So even though it's a different take on that same like eyes locking moment, I don't like when too much is gleaned from that moment. And that was quite repetitive in this book, how often that could happen. So if that's not an issue for you and you kind of enjoy that kind of exploration of character, you might really enjoy this book. But for me, that's a pet peeve of mine that I've had, throughout my life reading classics. So seeing that so often also really hindered my enjoyment. There were a couple moments where the descriptions of Paris and the craftsmanship of the writing was absolutely gorgeous, and it stopped me in my tracks. So I can see why James Baldwin is such like a respected and prolific author, because the craftsmanship is absolutely there. So I would definitely read other books by James Baldwin, but I think that this particular book just really, really wasn't for me. Because of that, I ended up giving this book 2 stars, and I know that I'm definitely in the minority with that rating. The next 2 books are by the same author, and that is The Empress of Salt and Fortune and When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nhi Vo. Both of these books are novellas that I've had on my radar for quite some time, but then a couple friends started talking about them and how much they enjoyed them, and that kind of bumped them up my TBR, and I finally picked them up. And let me tell you, they are so good. The first one, in my opinion, Empress, is a bit better than Tiger, but they're both really, really wonderful reads. Both of these books have the same main character that we follow, and they are a scholar at a monastery, and they travel the world to gather stories. And in the first one, we're being told the story of an empress who is forced into a political marriage with the emperor. And it's the story of her and this other girl that she befriends named Rabbit and their story. Now, I don't want to give any more of that away because it's a novella and that'd be giving too much away. But I will say that the last part of this book has an amazing political twist, and it's just great. The second book is also about a story being told, but this time it's a story being told from 2 different perspectives. So we hear the story told from the scholar's point of view, and then the story told from a tiger's point of view. And this book really plays with how stories can change depending on who is telling it, and how the power of words really affects how we see things in the future. And I thought that that was beautifully done. Both of these books kind of have that spoken word, sit by the fireside and tell a story kind of feel to them. And I would highly recommend the audiobooks because the narration is gorgeous. I gave The Empress of Salt and Fortune 5 stars, and I gave When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain 4 stars. The next book I read was When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. This was a thriller that got a lot of buzz a couple months back, and it's about our main character who returns to her childhood neighborhood only to find that it's being gentrified. And it slowly kind of becomes creepier and more nefarious from there. I was just trying to pull up my review of this book and I just deleted it. I'm so angry. I'm so angry with myself. Has anyone else done this before? Because now it's been a while since I've read it and I'm not going to be able to write such a good review again. Ugh. Well, anyway, I remember the gist of what I said, and essentially it's that this book it had a really good premise and it had a really good idea, and I really liked the social commentary that it had on gentrification, but I did not really like the application of it. I do think that gentrification and the way that it disenfranchises and erases the history of poor people or people of color is really important and needs to be discussed. However, the final end result of the thriller aspect of this novel didn't match the buildup that was created for it. So there was a very slow, kind of creepy buildup, and then the end just kind of went batshit crazy, in my opinion. If you're gonna have such a blockbuster ending to the book, it kind of has to match the buildup. And for me, it was kind of a pacing issue where it was like quiet and subtle for a bit too long for it to be such a dramatic ending. So while I did enjoy this book and I definitely felt the creepy crawly vibes, the end just kind of left me like, whoa, okay, that came out of nowhere. It was kind of how I was feeling. So while I do think that it deals with some really important issues that need to be discussed, the thriller aspect of this book, the pacing of the thriller aspect seemed pretty off to me. Overall, though, I can see why people really enjoyed this book and why it was like a bestseller, so I ended up giving this book a 3 stars. The next books on this list are a collection of books by the same author that you've seen before on my channel, if you've watched my best books of 2020 video, but those are June Idah's collection of works. Now, I do have some more of his works that I've collected in the meantime, but I didn't read all of those yet, so I can't include them here. But these 4 are all by the artist and author named June Idah. Now, this first one is the first one I ever got from him, and this is called No. This is a children's picture book. This second one was released actually in December of this year, or last year at this point. I'm going to do that a lot. And this one is called Kaibutsuem. This is also a children's picture book that has Japanese written in it as well. And this is about a monster zoo and their adventures with a bunch of kids on an imagination journey. So that is this one. These next 2 are art collections. So this one is called Home, and this one is called Hug. And this is by the same person, but these don't have any writing in them. So this one depicts all different types of hugs and how those hugs are all valid and necessary. So here's a little look. Oh, we got a little kitty cat. And a little kid with her daddy. So that is Hug. And the second one here is Home. Very similar to Hug, it shows different homes and explores the world of imagination, where homes might be, where you might find a little living space. And it's just a big collection of his work. If you've seen my best books of 2020 video, I go on about him for probably about 10 minutes. So if you want to know more in detail about these books, please check out that video. I'll have it up above and down below. But just know that this author and artist has become an obsession of mine last year. And like I said, I have already collected some more of his works, and I plan to continue to increase that collection because his art makes me happy, his picture books are beautiful, and I think his Japanese is also really beautiful. So yeah, I read all of these in this month. Oh, ratings, right. So this one I gave 5 stars, of course. This one, Kaibutsen, I gave 4 stars because I was disappointed with how little we got to see the actual inside of the monster zoo, and that's where Idah really excels in both his storytelling and his art, kind of going into those worlds of imagination. And I thought we spent too much time in the imagination of the children and less time in the imagination world of this monster zoo. I really would have liked to see more of that, so I gave this one 4 stars. And finally, for Hug and Home, I adore his artwork, and I gave these both 5 stars. I mean, we're not really shocked, are we? Speaking of Japanese kids' picture books, my Japanese in-laws know that I love reading. They also know that I'm trying to expand my Japanese reading comprehension, and they also kind of know what type of art I like. So they decided to gift me a little box set of some Japanese kids' picture books. Now, these ones are actually really popular. If you come to Japan, which I guess now in the pandemic you can't, but if you do in the future, you'll probably see these in bookstores. It's a gift set of 3 books. The first one being Daruma-san ga. The second one is Daruma-san to. And the third one is Daruma-san no. Now, if you don't know, a Daruma is this character here with the little red body and white face. It usually also has more of an angry look to it. It's also really popular in like traditional tattoo culture. So I love darumas, so that's another reason that they got these for me. Now these are specifically for kids, and these 3 particles, ga, to, and no, can be a little confusing when you're first learning Japanese. So no is actually from the Idah book No. This is the possessive in Japanese. To means with. Can have some other meanings to it as well, but simply it can mean with. And this ga is like a subject marker. It has a lot of different functions. So these books are supposed to help kids and people like me learn how to use these particles. And it does it with really cute pictures. So I'll just pick one to show you a little bit. This one is probably my favorite. It goes over onomatopoeia sounds as well. So sounds that things make when sounds happen. What am I trying to say here? So for example, in America, when something heavy drops, we would say bang. But in Japan, they would say don. So it teaches those kinds of sounds as well. So if we open it, it has a little daruma. And it says, Daruma-san ga tote. So this is the sound of just kind of falling over. If you can imagine a little wooden daruma, the sound that it might make when it falls over, that's what's written here. And it does that throughout the entire book. And the art is just so cute. Like, I can't get over it. So this brings a smile to my face every time I read it. And there were some onomatopoeia that I didn't know, honestly. So yeah, these just bring me joy. And I gave this one and Daruma to, I gave 5 stars. And then the last one, Daruma no, I gave 4 stars. Because something about it was just missing the charm. This last book, some of the charm was missing. So either way, these 3 books came in a really nice limited gift box set from my in-laws for Christmas, and I adore them. The next book that I finished was Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. Now, I'm not a huge middle grade reader in general, but this book may have changed my mind for that. I think I might be picking them up more often because this was such a joy to read. In this book, we follow Morgan Crow, who is a cursed child, and she's supposed to die on her 11th birthday. However, instead of dying, she gets swept away into this magical world of Nevermore, where she enters a magical school and has to go through a series of 3 trials. It is whimsical, it is magical, it's lighthearted. I enjoyed every second of this book. The main character, Morgan, is so lovable, and I think that Jessica Townsend did a really good job of creating an extremely unique world that I don't think I've seen ever before. And I'm definitely hooked, and I'm definitely going to read the rest of this series. I really want to read Wondersmith, which is the second book in this series. I wanted to get to it in January, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. But it's definitely a high priority. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars because I did think that there was just a little bit missing in the world building department. I would have liked to see a little more thrown in there, a little more exploration outside of like the main building that she stays in. But either way, I highly recommend this, and I can't wait to continue. The next book I read was Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. This was amazing. I loved every second of this. I read this via audiobook, so I listened to it when I would ride my bike to and from work, and then when I was like, doing laundry around the house, and I could not put this down. The narration was so good. I was just fascinated. Humans are terrifying and fascinating creatures. Like, we're so complex, and our history really demonstrates that. I loved seeing the development of the human species from, the multiple species that we were in the past to the singular species that we are now, and hearing the different, theories as to why that happened. It's just so fascinating. I definitely want to buy this physically for myself because while the audiobook was extremely enjoyable, there are some key points that I can't recall very clearly. So I want to read this again physically at some point because I want to take in the information a little bit slower and really let it sink into my brain, because I think there were so many unique and cool facts in this book that I really wish I kind of still had in there. So I definitely want to purchase this in the future. Maybe whenever I move my library to my forever place, that'll be a purchase that I make, because I want to work my way very slowly through this again. If you're at all interested in human nature, in history, even if you're not a history person, because I'm not, but I would still think that you could enjoy this book. I gave this book 5 stars. All right, we're almost there. The next one is A Torch Against the Night. Now, I have a holiday reading vlog coming out, hopefully soon, of me reading through this book, and I do mention some kind of detailed thoughts in that vlog, but just as an overview, I really enjoyed this book. I read An Ember in the Ashes as part of my Retro Reads BookTube challenge last year, and I loved it, so I purchased the entire series. I gave An Ember in the Ashes 4 stars, and I gave A Torch Against the Night 4.5 stars, I believe. 4? 4.5? One of those. My friend Tammy has dubbed this series Grimdark Light, and I agree 100% that needs to be a real genre, because that is what this is. It is a YA fantasy that has grimdark themes running through it, and I think that they're handled really well. I also like that a lot of the arcs in this book, while some are predictable, some of them really catch you by surprise, and Sabaa Tahir is not afraid to make her characters go through it. No one is safe, and I think that that adds a lot of stakes to this series that I don't usually see in YA fantasy. For those of you who don't know, this is a series that follows our 3 main characters. We have Laia, Helene, and Elias. These characters live in a caste-based society. So in the beginning, Laia is in the bottom caste, the slavery caste, and Helene and Elias are in the higher caste, or the top caste. And it's about political unrest and war in this world. I think the character work in this book was amazing. Like, honestly, Helene, she could step on me and I would say thank you. Like, I'm obsessed with her. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the story. I also really liked the world expansion that we got. So we get to see different areas of this world that was expanded from the first book. The only thing I would say is that the magic system in this book is very slow moving to be revealed, almost to the point where it doesn't seem congruent with the world. It just kind of seems like placed on top. I think I've said this a couple times on my channel, but when a world doesn't seem integrated with the magic system enough, it just feels like it's kind of placed on top of something and not integrated. That really bothers me, and that kind of have that feel with this book. So I wish that Sabaa Tahir would put a little bit more focus on revealing those aspects of this world, but it didn't take away from my reading. It was just something that I wish I'd seen more of. So overall, thoroughly enjoying this series. I went straight into the third book, which I'm currently reading, and yeah, I highly recommend it. The last book I read in December was the fourth volume of Monstrous, War Child. Now, I have to say how much I appreciate Sophia over on Fantasy Book Addict, because she sent this book to me for Christmas, and she's precious and wonderful, and I love her because I wanted to read this so bad, and I couldn't really justify the price tag or the shipping for myself at the time. And then it showed up on my doorstep because Sophia is amazing. Thank you so, so much for sending this to me, Sophia. Sophia is the queen of Monstrous, so now that I'm finished, I'm excited to share my thoughts and see what she thinks. This series is a very dark graphic novel series about a war-torn world that has different factions. It has the Arcanes, who are like magical beings. It has humans, and it has the witches. The witches have a very tenuous relationship with the humans where they kind of help each other out to wipe out the Arcanes, and it's a very, very bloody war. Our main character, Micah, has like a demon, like old god living inside her, and she has to battle with that as well as battle the outside world. And so I won't go any more into it than that because this is the fifth volume. I will say that this book was Kippa's book. And Kippa is a character who's like a ray of light in this dark world. And so it was really, really nice to see her get a lot of page time. She's wonderful and precious and a cinnamon bun and needs to be protected at all costs, essentially. So I really enjoyed seeing more of her here. However, the flow of this book was a bit choppy. The flow from one page to another was not very smooth, so we would have one full page of panels with one set of characters, and then without any kind of transition, you turn the page and you're with a different set of characters in a different location, and that was a bit jarring at times. Like, I had to kind of pull myself out and be like, okay, wait a minute, why did we change characters? What happened here? And I think that could have been a bit smoother from the storytelling perspective. But previous issues that I had with it, which were the flow of the fight scenes, the panels with the fight scenes, the flow wasn't the best, like different weapons would appear out of nowhere. That has really improved. I think I saw maybe one instance of it in this book, but it was because I was specifically looking for it. I think if you weren't, it would have flowed just fine. So I think that those technical aspects have really improved. I just wish that the other, like the technical aspect of like flowing through the story would be a little bit better. But besides that, the story itself is fantastic. I think it really delves into what it means to be human and human nature. And while it's not a light, fluffy read, it's a fun one. So I am really excited to read the next book. I'm not sure when the next installment comes out, actually. But best believe when it does, I'm gonna want to get my hands on it. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Well, goddamn, my voice is tired. Your girl read a good amount this past month. I'm really happy with what I read. I think I did a good job this month, just letting myself do mood reading and kind of do whatever I wanted. But I am excited to kind of get back to TBR-based reading in January. So look out for that TBR. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Jane!